President Trump firing up another big crowd today, this time at the annual NRA convention in Dallas.
We are all finally putting America first. We are seeing the incredible results as a result of our massive tax cuts, and everybody is benefiting and everybody is happy. And the Democrats are very concerned. You watch how well we do in 18. You watch. You watch. Get out and vote. Don't be complacent. Kanye West must have some power, because you probably saw I doubled my African American poll numbers. We went from 11 to 22 in 1 week. Thank you, Kanye. Thank you. You just saw the recent poll. It came out, the Rasmussen, 51 or 52. It's the highest level I've ever been at. How does that happen when you only get bad publicity? How does that happen? Democratic lawmakers have voted against legislation to close deadly immigration loopholes, like catch and release. How about that one? We caught them. Oh, release them. Bye-bye. We're going to keep the violent criminals out. Senate Democrats like John Tester. You saw what happened there. What he did to one of the finest people in our country. What he did to the Admiral. What he did is a disgrace.
He went on to expound on the subject of gun rights in a speech before thousands of Second Amendment supporters and thanked them for their patriotism. Watch this.
The true American patriots of the NRA, who defend our rights, our liberty, and our great American flag. You have never stopped fighting for our beloved Constitution. They said, you know, going to the NRA convention and speaking today, that'll be very controversial. It might not be popular. You know what I said? Bye-bye, got to get on the plane. Because we have to do the right thing.
All right, we'll take it around the table. Greg, he was having some fun today.
Yeah, I always use the metaphor of he's like a classic rock band who does hits in front of a loving crowd, you know, like the Wall is his stairway to heaven. But he introduced some new hits. The Kanye is a new song. And the best part, without question, is the John Kerry material that he introduced, which was stellar comedy roast. When he talked about, you know, when you're 73, you shouldn't be riding a bike, and about how he fell off the bike. It was just perfect stuff. And I always find it, I mean, this to him is entertainment for himself and entertainment for others. And it's I guess it's an antidote to the news, because when you're listening to the news, all you're getting is the bad news. You're getting the stormy stuff and the collusion accusations. But when he gets up there, what he does is he talks about the job numbers. He talks about North Korea. He talks about the good news, which is the antidote to the bad news. So it's kind of healthy for him, and it's healthy for his supporters, and it's actually healthy for people watching at home to see the other side.
Well, and if you're watching Fox, I don't know if the other networks took it live, but we did. And so in some ways, the bully pulpit really is very powerful. If you're going to give a speech in front of a big crowd and you get a chance to watch it, it means a lot more than watching any sort of newscast.
Yeah, absolutely. It's perfectly produced, and I think a good plug for your book, and the good news is, right? So he's leading with what the good news is. He's changing the dialogue and the narrative because the media won't give it to him, so he's going to take it and take charge. So he's very good when he's at these campaign rally speeches or in front of a group that's a receptive audience that kind of, you know, they're picking up what he's dropping. So it's perfect. He really feels at home in a situation like that as well.
I actually watched it in a room that had MSNBC and CNN on it. And there were a couple of interesting things. First of all, it's the president's only time with unfettered access to actually communicate his message. But I was fascinated because there were cutaways. There were times when the audience was applauding, and the audience would, you know, Donald Trump had stopped speaking for 15, 20 seconds because there's so much applause. Fox News went to cutaways of the audience to show what was actually happening in the room. CNN and MSNBC, no cutaways. There's no way they were going to show that audience. But let's remember, going into 2018, it's about getting the base enthused, and that's the problem. He spent a whole section of his speech talking about the enthusiasm level, and you better, if you like your Second Amendment rights, you better get up.
It's a good point about the midterms, Juan, going into them, that's never necessarily easy for a president in their first midterm. They usually lose seats. And even though his approval with Republicans is high, probably highest that it's been, maybe like I think it's 88%, 90%, That doesn't always translate into enthusiasm and getting out to vote. And do you think that was part of his ploy today?
Oh, it's clear. If you watch the speech, that's clearly what he was saying. Don't be complacent. I think we just played that clip, Dana. But so what was interesting to me is if you consider the midterms, you look at the poll numbers have turned in favor of gun control very strongly. And after Parkland, remember, the president was in the White House. I think we carried it here on Fox, having a meeting and saying, you know what, I think we need stronger gun control. You guys, he says to the others, you guys are afraid of the NRA. I'm not afraid of the NRA. And, of course, then about 5 days later, he flip-flops. But nonetheless, he is trying to make the case that he is the man who the NRA poured $30 million into during his campaign, and that he is still the NRA's friend. I think after he got elected, he said, you know, you are with me, and I will always be with you.
Were you surprised, Greg, they didn't talk a little bit more about that? Like, he said he was willing to go to challenge the NRA. But I think one of the things that the president does is he says, well, that makes sense. And then a couple days later, it's like, oh, wait, now I understand why, for example, arming school teachers might not be something you can do nationally, that will have to be decided on a case-by-case basis in the districts.
I think that the blessing and the challenge of Donald Trump is he's like the first conversational president we've ever had. So he'll just talk about anything. And if A happens, he'll talk about A. And he goes, you know what, that upsets me what just happened. And then if B happens, he'll go, well, wait a second. I mean, he went on a long tear on how if one person has a gun, lives would be saved in areas where there were no guns. And it's, you know, there's a CDC study, Center for Disease Control study, that was not published that supports the claims of 2 million plus defensive gun uses. And this is an important thing. My thing fell out to talk about. So he did it. But I always get the sense that the speech is essentially the same, and then he tweaks it depending on the it's for the NRA, so he drops like 10 minutes of that in the NRA. But that was I think there was a stock positive speech about deeds. Overall, it was about deeds in the face of what you get from the media, which are words.
Well, you know, I think the whole gun movement, the NRA right now, is on the defensive. Gun sales down. Smith & Wesson are the ones who I think are saying, you know what, you know, they also outdoor brands. The outdoor brands make Smith & Wessons. Their stocks are down. Remington's in bankruptcy. I think there's a sense that you have a Republican in office, so it's not driving the gun buyers to the gun stores, which is what, you know, they said Obama's going to take your gun. Well, now nobody thinks that.
You should be happy then, because that means we've saturated the market. Everybody has their guns.
But what strikes me is that so many people, including teachers who are clearly opposed to carrying guns into school, including suburbanites, are saying, you know, in the aftermath of Parkland, maybe something should change. And then that brought up what I think was the controversial issue regarding the president's speech today, and also Vice President Pence, which is the Secret Service said no guns in here. And so you get people, even NRA supporters who are attending the convention, saying, wait a minute, they don't trust the good guys with the guns? How can that be? Well, you can see why so many Americans would say, of course not. You shouldn't have a gun around the president. You shouldn't have guns around my school.
There were plenty of people in the room with guns.
Yes, there was.
Secret Service agents are not the audience.
Talk about one other thing the president discussed, and it's Greg's favorite part. He mentioned it in the opening remarks about North Korea. Take a listen to this.
The last administration had a policy of silence. Don't talk. You may make them and him angry. Don't talk. If a horrible statement is made about the United States, don't say anything. We have no comment. Please, please. Oh, my God. And we have the former administration as represented by John Kerry. Not the best negotiator we've ever seen. He never walked away from the table, except to be in that bicycle race where he fell and broke his leg. Learn from that. At 73 years old, you never go into a bicycle race, okay? Just don't. We're saying, this is going to be nuclear war. We're going to have no. You know what gets you nuclear war? Weakness gets you nuclear war. Being weak gets you nuclear war.
One of his strengths, Jason, I think, is that he uses humor to then make a point. His point being that being strong against your enemies will bring them to the table, and that's actually how you bring
peace through strength. Do you remember when Barack Obama, he said he was big into skeet shooting, and they had pictures of him out there, you know, pretending to shoot skeet, and then he had John Kerry supposedly out, you know, pheasant hunting. Nobody ever bought into that. But Donald Trump, he has this authenticity that connects people, even though he's this billionaire.
And he doesn't pretend to go and do that, right?
Yeah, he doesn't fake it. Yeah.
No, this was great. I think for him, he felt like he gets back into his element, to his groove. He right away, you know, this is something coming in the aftermath of the Parkland shootings. He was able to go in front of the NRA, which is taking a lot of criticism lately. There's a lot of people trying to abolish the Second Amendment, get after your guns. He went straight to them, to the crowd, because he then invited people to the White House to have this discussion, too. And I thought that was important to show that he's listening to both sides, people who are concerned about gun safety, gun violence, and then going right to the group that's trying to protect the Second Amendment. So I like it. It's right up, you know, in your face, and not afraid to answer questions and talk and get to the issues.
So I think he's got to do something with Republicans, because, I mean, you look at what happened in Florida, and now you're looking at other states, some with Republicans, Kasich in Ohio, but you look at Vermont, you look at Oregon. More and more Republicans are saying, yeah, we buy into the fact that most Americans now overwhelmingly want some reasoned gun control. It's not about taking anybody's guns away. I don't think anybody's talking about
Well, a lot of people are talking about
No,
that.
I don't
yes,
think
they
they
are. They're
I think
saying
they tried.
abolish the Second Amendment,
No.
that this is excessive. There's laws
I
on the
think
books
John
right now. They just need to be, well, there you go.
No, I think former Supreme Court Justice Stevens said something
He
like that
did
in
say
an
that.
op-ed. But it's not the kids, it's not the Parkland kids, and it's not most Americans. What you're seeing in terms of the 60+% who want more gun control is better background checks, maybe an age limit on who buys long guns.
But if the Democrats take the House with
safe.
Nancy Pelosi in charge, and that's exactly what has happened, they will do everything they can to take away guns. And everybody
But see,
knows
don't
that.
you think, though, Jason, that would work against just politically, if you're thinking Nancy Pelosi might want to do that? But as soon as you're done with the midterm election, we're talking about the general election.
Correct.
And if Nancy Pelosi were to do that, how you want to make sure that Republicans really turn out in 2020? Nancy Pelosi should try to pass gun control. I mean, and that's part of the reason there's frustration that Congress never gets anything done.
Can I return to that video that we played of him talking about John Kerry?
Yeah.
If you noticed, he did the panicky man impersonation, which is when he moves his hands like this. It's a lesson for all of us that it's not specific to any particular person. He does that.
But that's not the same thing as what
Yes,
you're
it
talking
is.
about.
If
It's
you
the
look at-
exact same thing?
Pretty much, pretty close.
Okay.